You have 2 days to get your stuff out, Emily. We've made our decision. That's what my father said, right there, at the dinner table, over mashed potatoes and roast chicken. He didn't raise his voice, but his words were as cold as the glass of water in front of him, and in that moment, I couldn't even swallow the food in my mouth. My mother didn't look at me. She kept cutting her chicken, slow and precise, like she was trying to carve away her own guilt. My brother Nathan stared down at his plate, pretending not to hear. I looked around the table, the same oak table that had been in our family since before I was born. The one my dad built himself, back when he used to hum while he worked in the garage. That table had seen birthday cakes, Thanksgiving prayers, late-night laughter, and now? It was witnessing my eviction. The air was thick with silence, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock behind me. It was 7:18 p.m. on a Tuesday, the night I stopped being their daughter and became their disappointment. Just a week before that dinner, everything still felt manageable. Not perfect, but manageable. I was 26, still living at home in our quiet Ohio suburb after finishing my degree late. The plan was simple: get a job, save some money, then move out. My parents had agreed. Mom would always say, "As long as you're trying, honey, we'll help however we can." And I was trying. Every morning, I woke up early, brewed coffee for both of us, and sent out job applications. The smell of toasted bread and the soft hum of our old dishwasher filled those mornings. My dad would be in his usual spot by the window, reading the newspaper with his glasses perched on the edge of his nose. "Any luck today?" he'd ask without looking up. "Hopefully," I'd reply, forcing a smile. But the truth was, I'd been getting rejection after rejection. Marketing jobs, admin work, even a front desk role at a dentist's office all said the same thing: "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." It wore me down slowly. I'd stay up late rewriting my resume, whispering to myself that it was just a phase, that things would turn around. My brother Nathan, on the other hand, seemed to glide through life. At 24, he already had a stable job at Dad's insurance company. He'd just bought a new car, and my parents couldn't stop bragging about him. "Your brother's got such drive," Dad would say at least twice a week. "He's really focused," Mom would add, and then they'd glance at me, the silence hanging like a question neither of them wanted to ask out loud. Still, we were a family, or so I thought. We had our Sunday dinners, movie nights, and those random evenings where Mom would bake brownies just because she felt like something sweet. But beneath the laughter and warmth, I'd started noticing little cracks, like how Dad stopped asking about my job search altogether, or how Mom's tone softened whenever she spoke to Nathan but hardened when it was me. I brushed it off. Families go through phases, right? That's what I told myself. Until the day I found out that phases can sometimes be decisions, quiet, final, and made without you. It started with a strange conversation. One afternoon, I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. I was coming downstairs to refill my coffee when I heard my name. "She's old enough to be on her own, Tom," Mom said quietly. My heart thudded. I froze on the staircase. "I know," Dad sighed. "But it's not that simple. You know what happened last time she tried moving out? They were talking about when I'd tried to rent an apartment 2 years ago and ended up scammed by a fake landlord, losing my savings." Mom replied, "I'm just tired, Tom. It feels like she's stuck." And Dad said, "Maybe a push is what she needs." My hands went cold. They were planning something. I backed away before they could see me and pretended I hadn't heard. But for the rest of that day, their voices replayed in my head. A push. It sounded gentle, almost loving, but something about it made my stomach twist. That evening at dinner, I tried to act normal. Nathan was talking about his promotion. Mom laughed at something he said, her eyes crinkling the way they used to when I was little, and I smiled, pretending I wasn't thinking about their conversation. But deep down, I knew something was coming. The next few days, small things began to change. Dad stopped asking if I wanted to join him on his morning walks. Mom didn't leave leftovers for me in the fridge anymore. Nathan stopped inviting me out with his friends, saying, "You wouldn't really like them, Em." It was subtle, almost invisible, but I felt it, like standing in a room that used to be warm but slowly losing heat. Then came that Tuesday night. Dinner started like any other. Mom had cooked roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Nathan had brought a bottle of wine. The air smelled like garlic and thyme. I remember thinking how nice it was to all sit together again. Maybe things were turning around. Maybe that conversation in the kitchen didn't mean what I thought. But halfway through dinner, Dad put down his fork and cleared his throat. "Emily," he said, using that calm, careful tone he used when something serious was coming. "Yeah?" I looked up, smiling faintly. He didn't smile back. "You've been here a while since graduation." "Yeah," I nodded, unsure where he was going. "It's been a few months. It's been almost a year," Mom interrupted quietly, still cutting her food. My chest tightened. Dad continued. "We think it's time you start the next chapter, honey. You need your own space, your own responsibilities." I felt my hands tremble. "Dad, I'm trying. I just haven't." He raised a hand, stopping me. "We've decided to give you 2 days to pack up and find somewhere to stay." I froze. My fork slipped from my fingers, clattering against the plate. 2 days? I whispered. "Where am I supposed to go in 2 days?" Mom finally looked up, but her eyes were steady, not sympathetic. "You'll figure it out, you always do." Nathan's voice broke the silence. "It's not that bad, Em. Maybe this'll be good for you." I turned to him, searching his face for some kind of understanding, but all I saw was that smug, pitying smile. That's when I realized it wasn't a conversation. It was an announcement, a verdict, and my whole family had agreed on it without me. I don't remember much after that. I just remember sitting there, my food going cold, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. And when I finally stood up, my voice shook so hard it barely came out. "You're really doing this to me?" No one answered. So I walked upstairs, closed my door, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself cry. Not just from hurt, but from something deeper. A kind of disbelief that people you love could turn into a problem to be solved. I didn't know it then, but that dinner would become the line between before and after the night my family pushed me out. And I learned who I truly was without them. That night, I didn't sleep much. Every creak of the old house sounded louder, almost like the walls themselves were reminding me I didn't belong there anymore. My childhood room, pale yellow with fading posters, and the bookshelf Dad built me when I was 12 suddenly felt smaller. The air was heavy, stale. Even the hum of the streetlight outside my window seemed colder than usual. I kept hearing Dad's voice. "You have 2 days to get your stuff out." Those words looped in my head, wrapping around every thought like barbed wire. I'd always believed love was unconditional, especially a parent's love. But that night, I started to wonder if maybe love had fine print I never noticed. By morning, the house was quiet. No smell of coffee, no sound of dishes. Just silence, thick, deliberate. When I walked downstairs, I saw a note on the counter in Mom's neat handwriting. "Outrunning error. Anne's. Breakfast in the fridge if you want it." I opened the fridge. There was half a carton of milk, some old leftovers, and a plastic container labeled Nathan. Nothing with my name. I closed the door slowly. It wasn't the lack of food that hurt, it was the absence of care. The small, daily kindnesses I'd taken for granted were gone overnight. Around noon, I got a text from my cousin Laura. "Laura, hey, heard about what happened. You okay?" "Me, how did you hear?" "Laura, Aunt Maggie mentioned it. Said your parents decided it's time you stood on your own." Aunt Maggie, that meant Mom had already told the family. A flush of humiliation crept up my neck. I imagined them talking about me at Sunday brunch. My situation passed around like a sad little secret. "Me, I'm fine. Just figuring things out. Laura, if you need a couch for a few nights, you can crash here." I thanked her, but my pride wouldn't let me say yes. At least, not yet. The rest of that day, I packed quietly, or at least pretended to. I folded clothes into boxes just to feel like I was doing something, though I had no idea where I'd take them. Around 5 p.m., I heard the front door open. Dad's voice echoed from the hallway, low and tired. "Em?" I froze for a second, then stepped into the hall. "Yeah?" He stood there, his briefcase in one hand, his tie loosened. He looked older than usual. The lines on his forehead were deeper, his eyes dim. "Your mother said you started packing." "Yeah," I said softly, still figuring out where to go. He nodded but didn't meet my eyes. For a second I thought I saw something regret, maybe, but it vanished quickly. "Good," he said. "This will be good for you." I wanted to ask why now. Why not wait until I found a job? Why not talk to me first? But the words caught in my throat. I could tell by the stiffness in his posture that this conversation was already over. That evening, I found myself sitting in the backyard, the same one where we used to have barbecues and play cornhole every 4th of July. The grass was cool under my feet, and the scent of lilacs drifted from Mom's garden. I remembered when she used to call me out there to help her prune the roses. She'd wear that big straw hat, and I'd tease her about looking like a movie gardener. She'd laugh, flicking water from the hose at me. That memory felt like it belonged to another life. Now, the garden was quiet. The hose was coiled neatly, and Mom didn't ask me to help anymore. That's when I noticed something odd. By the patio chair near the garden bed was a crumpled piece of paper. I picked it up, smoothing it out. It was a printout of a rental listing a small one-bedroom apartment just a few miles away. The name on the contact line? Thomas Miller. My stomach dropped. It was dated last week, before the dinner. That meant they'd been planning this, maybe even arranging it before they told me. So that was the push they'd talked about. They weren't just throwing me out, they'd already found a place for me to go. Except they hadn't told me. I sat there, staring at that piece of paper as the sun dipped behind the fence. The golden light turned orange, then dimmed to gray. I thought about how Mom couldn't look at me during dinner. How Dad's voice stayed calm, almost rehearsed. It all made sense now. They'd made a decision about my life together and left me to deal with the fallout. Later that night, I confronted Mom. She was in the living room watching one of those home renovation shows she loved. The glow of the TV reflected in her glasses. "Mom," I said quietly. She looked up. "Yes?" I held out the paper. "What's this?" Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. "Oh, that's something your father was looking at." For me, a pause. "Then we just thought it might help if you had a starting point." My voice cracked. "A starting point? You mean somewhere to go when you kick me out?" "Don't say it like that," she said, her tone sharp. "We're not kicking you out, Emily. We're encouraging you to move forward." I laughed bitterly. "By giving me 48 hours? She sighed, lowering the volume on the TV. "You've been here almost a year, sweetie. We thought maybe you needed motivation. You've always been comfortable." That word stung more than anything else. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't unmotivated. Em gave a small smile. "I hope so. Once things settle." Then Dad's voice joined in from the kitchen. "Let's just keep it quiet until she's settled in her own place. We don't need drama before that. 3 voices, 3 people I loved, all keeping a secret." I backed up the stairs as quietly as I could, my pulse pounding in my ears. Something was happening, something they didn't want me to know. The next morning I woke up. I peeked through my window and saw Dad and Nathan getting into the car together. That was odd. They never left together unless it was for work, and Nathan didn't usually go in on Fridays. Curiosity burned in my chest. I grabbed my hoodie and slipped out the back door, walking down the street until their car was out of sight. Then I called for a rideshare and told the driver to follow the address I'd seen on that apartment, listing the one with Dad's name. It felt foolish, desperate even, but something in my gut told me that was where they were headed. The drive took about 15 minutes. When the car turned onto a quiet residential street lined with old oaks and small duplexes, my heart began to race. I asked the driver to stop at the corner. I didn't want to be seen. From behind a parked SUV, I watched as Dad's silver sedan pulled up to a beige one-bedroom building. Nathan got out first, holding a clipboard. Dad followed, keys in hand. They walked inside. I stood there for a minute, frozen. Then slowly I crossed the street. The building looked tired, faded paint, weeds by the curb, but still livable. The kind of place you'd choose if you wanted cheap rent. There was a for lease sign by the door, but someone had scribbled leased across it in marker, and taped beside the door, fluttering slightly in the breeze, was a printed note. Lease agreement, Unit 2B. Tenant, Emily Miller. Guarantor, Thomas Miller. I felt my stomach drop. They had already signed a lease in my name before even telling me I didn't need to see inside to know what this meant. They hadn't suggested I move out. They decided it for me. They hadn't trusted me to choose. They just arranged it. I turned away, tears stinging my eyes, and started walking. The November wind bit at my face, sharp and cold, but I barely felt it. The betrayal wasn't just in the action, it was in the message behind it. We've stopped believing you can handle your own life. When I got home, the house felt different, not just empty, but foreign, like a hotel room I'd overstayed in. I walked into the kitchen, still in my jacket, and laid the lease paper on the table. When Mom walked in a few minutes later, she froze. "Where did you get that? You really thought I wouldn't find out?" I asked, my voice trembling but quiet. She blinked, caught off guard. Emily, we were going to tell you tonight. After what? After you moved my stuff while I was gone? Don't be dramatic. Don't you dare call me dramatic, I snapped, my voice echoing off the tile. You went behind my back, signed a lease and called it love. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Sweetheart, please, calm down. We did this to help you. Help me? I let out a shaky laugh. You made choices for me, Mom, without even asking. You didn't help, you controlled. Dad appeared in the doorway, his face tight. What's going on? I turned to him, the paper shaking in my hand. You tell me. He looked at it, then at me. His expression didn't change. I thought you'd be grateful. Grateful? I repeated, almost whispering. For being evicted under the guise of kindness? Don't twist this, he said sharply. You needed a place and I found one. You've been struggling for too long. This is a clean start. I could feel my hands trembling. Why didn't you talk to me, Dad? Why didn't you just ask what I needed? He hesitated, then said quietly, because every time we tried, you got defensive. That sentence landed like a pun. Shh. Maybe it was true. Maybe I had been defensive because I was scared, because I didn't want them to see how much I was failing, but still, they'd gone too far. You should have trusted me enough to fail my own way, I said. That's what growing up is supposed to be. For a moment, the room went still. The only sound was the faint buzz of the refrigerator. Then Nathan walked in, holding his coffee. Oh, she found out? He said casually. I turned on him. You knew? He shrugged. Of course. I helped Dad look over the lease. I stared at him, my own brother, the one who used to build Lego castles with me on this very floor. You all decided this together, I said slowly, like I was some burden to be managed. No one spoke. That silence, heavy, unbroken, told me everything I needed to know. I walked past them up the stairs and closed my door gently. No slamming, no shouting, just quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when your world rearranges itself around a truth you can't unsee. That night, I didn't cry. I just sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, letting the numbness settle. I thought about all the times I'd supported Nathan, cheered for him, covered for him, all the times I'd cleaned the house when Mom was sick, or picked up Dad's dry cleaning when he forgot. It hit me then they didn't see me anymore. They saw a version of me that existed only in their disappointment. And maybe that's the cruelest kind of betrayal, not when someone lies to you, but when they stop seeing who you are and replace you with who they think you've become. By the next morning, my decision was clear. If they wanted me gone, I'd go. But not the way they expected, because sometimes the best way to reclaim your life is to let the people who broke your trust watch you rebuild it without needing their permission. I woke up early the next morning not because I wanted to, but because sleep felt impossible. My alarm hadn't gone off yet. The house was still dark, the faint blue of dawn slipping through the blinds. For a while, I just sat there, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the wind brushing against the window pane. There was something strangely peaceful about that silence. It was the kind of quiet that comes after a storm when everything inside you is wrecked, but still, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. Just clear. For the first time in months, maybe years, I knew what I needed to do. I made coffee in the kitchen black, no sugar, and sat at the same oak table where everything had fallen apart just 3 nights earlier. The house smelled faintly of toast and lemon cleaner. Mom must have already been up earlier and tidied the counters. She always cleaned when she was anxious. I looked around the family photos on the wall, the chipped edges of the cabinets, the sunlight touching the corner of the floor. It all looked so familiar. And yet, it wasn't mine anymore. That realization didn't sting this time. It just was. By mid-morning, I was making calls. The first was to Laura, my cousin, the only person who had reached out when word spread through the family about Emily finally being pushed out. When she answered, her voice was warm, still half asleep. Hey, Em, you okay? I hesitated for a second, then said, Do you still have that couch available? She laughed softly. I'll make you coffee, too. I smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't the ideal plan, crashing on her couch, but it was mine. My choice. The next call I made was harder. I opened my laptop, pulled up a job listing I'd bookmarked weeks ago, and dialed the number. It was for a small local design agency, not glamorous, not high-paying, but something in me had been drawn to it. a woman answered, her voice brisk but kind. "Marianne, creative coordinator. How can I help you?" "Hi," I said, taking a breath. "My name's Emily Miller. I applied for the assistant position 2 weeks ago. I just wanted to follow up. I'm still very interested." There was a pause. I could hear typing. "Oh, yes," she said. "I remember your resume. We were actually about to schedule interviews for next week." My heart thudded. "Would you still consider me? Can you come in Monday at 10? I exhaled, almost laughing from relief. "Absolutely. Thank you so much." When I hung up, I felt a small flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. I spent the rest of that day packing with purpose this time, not sadness. Box by box, I filled my things not out of loss, but out of preparation. There was something therapeutic about it. Folding clothes, labeling boxes, deciding what to keep and what to let go. I came across old journals from college, my half-finished sketchbooks, even a letter Mom had written to me when I first left for school. It read, "Remember, Em, you can always come home. Love, Mom." I ran my fingers over the words for a long time. How ironic that now home was the one place I wasn't welcome, but instead of breaking me, that realization steadied me. Because I understood something now, home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's the peace you build when you stop needing permission to exist. That evening, while Mom and Dad were out at a dinner party, I went downstairs to the basement. It smelled like old paint and sawdust. Dad's tools were still neatly arranged on the pegboard, labels written in his neat handwriting: wrench, screwdriver, socket set. I found an empty cardboard box and filled it with some old family albums, a blanket, and a few small things that mattered to me: a ceramic mug I'd made in art class, the candle Mom had given me one Christmas, my favorite book. I wasn't stealing. I was just keeping the parts of my childhood that still felt like mine. When I came back upstairs, Nathan was sitting at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone. He looked up, smirking slightly. "So you're really doing it," he said. "Looks that way. Where are you going?" "Somewhere safe," I replied. He nodded, pretending to sound supportive. "Well, good for you. About time, huh?" There it was again, that quiet condescension. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "You know, Nathan, you've always been good at making things sound like compliments when they're actually insults." He blinked, caught off guard. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said softly, "you might want to stop mistaking someone's struggle for laziness. You got lucky, Nate. You had Dad lining up your opportunities before you even finished college. Not everyone does." For once, he didn't have a clever response. I picked up my box, gave him a small smile, and said, "Take care of them for me." Then I went upstairs to finish packing. When my parents came home later that night, I was ready. My bags were by the door, my boxes stacked neatly in the hallway. Mom's heels clicked against the floor as she entered, her voice bright until she saw me standing there. "Emily, what's all this? I'm moving out tonight." Her face fell. "Tonight? You don't have to rush, honey." "Yes," I said firmly. "I do." Dad stepped forward. "Where are you going?" "Laura's." He frowned. "You can't just impose on her like that." I looked him straight in the eye. She offered, "And besides, it's temporary. I have an interview Monday." That seemed to surprise him. "You do?" "Yes." I found it myself. For a moment no one spoke. The silence was thick, heavy with unspoken things. Then Mom said softly, "We were just trying to help you, Em." "I know," I said, "but you can't help someone by deciding their life for them." Her eyes glistened. "We just didn't want to watch you drift. And I didn't want to stop trying," I whispered. "But you didn't see that part." She looked down, her lips trembling. Dad stood beside her, his jaw tight but unreadable. I lifted my suitcase and turned toward the door. "I'll come back for the rest later." Emily, Mom's voice cracked. I paused but didn't turn around. "Don't worry," I said quietly. "I'm not running away. I'm just walking towards something that's mine." Then I stepped out into the cold night air. The November wind hit my face as I walked to the car Laura had sent for me. The streetlights flickered, painting soft golden circles on the pavement. As we drove away, I looked back one last time at the house, the glowing windows, the porch swing creaking in the wind. It didn't look like home anymore. And that was okay, because maybe leaving wasn't a loss. Maybe it was the first real act of love for myself. That night, I arrived at Laura's apartment, a small 2-bedroom place above a bookstore downtown. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon and old paper. She opened the door in sweatpants, her hair in a messy bun, and just hugged me without saying a word. For the first time in days, I let myself breathe. I set my bag down, took off my jacket, and sank into her couch. It wasn't much, but it felt like freedom. And somewhere deep inside, beneath all the hurt and confusion, I knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through Laura's living room window, cutting across the threadbare rug like a spotlight. I hadn't slept well, too many thoughts swirling, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a small sense of control. I made coffee, wrapped myself in a blanket, and opened my laptop. I wanted to write not just job applications but my side of the story. I started typing slowly at first, carefully choosing words that were honest without being cruel. I described the dinner, the lease, the secrecy, the betrayal. By the time I paused, I had pages of text, pages I wasn't ready to send, but pages that finally felt like mine. Later that day, I shared the story with Laura and a few close friends over a group chat. Emily, I need advice. Not about moving, about them. Laura, your parents? Nathan? Emily, yes. I feel like everyone's going to think I overreacted. Friend 1, you didn't. Friend 2, that's insane. Who does that without talking first? Their responses made me realize something I hadn't admitted. I wasn't just hurt because of the eviction. I was hurt because no one had stood up for me, not even my family. And once I put it into words, I wanted others to see it. By Thursday, I'd made a decision. I shared an edited version of my story on a private blog and social media, carefully anonymous, but enough details that friends and family could recognize it. I expected maybe a few supportive comments. Instead, it went viral. It started with a friend sharing the post, then another. By Friday morning, the story had hundreds of shares. People started commenting, "I can't believe parents would do this. This is exactly why adult children need to be listened to, not controlled. Emily is brave for standing up for herself." Some comments were harsher. "She's being dramatic. Parents know best." Even so, the support outweighed the criticism. By the weekend, things began to reach home. Dad received a call from his brother, my uncle, who asked, "Tom, did you really post Emily into a lease without telling her?" Mom's friend texted, "I read something online. Is it true?" Nathan got snide messages from coworkers who had seen the story floating in the community group. Suddenly, the quiet solution they'd planned wasn't quiet anymore. I didn't feel triumphant. Not really. Instead, I felt steady. I watched from Laura's couch as the ripple effect unfolded. People I'd known my whole life, family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, were beginning to see the choices my parents had made. Choices I had been too scared to question before. It was awkward for them. For the first time, Dad and Mom had to confront the fact that the truth wasn't just in their house. It was outside it. And outside was watching. One afternoon, Dad came to Laura's apartment. He hesitated on the doorstep, clearly unsure if he had permission to enter. "Emily," he began. I let him finish, silent. I did. Didn't realize it would come out like this. "We just thought." "I know what you thought," I interrupted gently. "But you didn't ask me. You didn't trust me." He lowered his gaze. "I thought it would be easier. You'd have somewhere to go." "Easier for you, Dad," I said softly. "Not for me." He nodded slowly, unable to argue. That day I realized the public consequence wasn't about shaming them. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability. Mom stopped speaking for a few hours, then called later that evening. Her voice was quieter than usual. "Emily, I'm sorry. For going behind your back. I appreciate that," I said. "But words aren't enough. I need trust. I need respect." She paused. "I know," and even Nathan, the one who had been smug and silent, finally texted. "Nathan, hey, I get it. I messed up. It was a small step, but it was progress." That weekend, I attended a community event with Laura. Neighbors who had seen the post came up, some offering hugs, others just nods of acknowledgement. I realized that the story wasn't just about me, it had become a conversation starter. About parents, adult children, boundaries, and the quiet ways we sometimes harm the people we love most. For the first time, I understood the power of speaking truth, not to punish, but to illuminate. By the following week, Dad and Mom began attending family counseling, something they'd resisted before. Nathan joined reluctantly, but he came. It wasn't perfect. There was no magic apology that fixed years of miscommunication. No single day when everything felt normal again. But the first cracks of awareness had formed. They saw me differently, not just as their child, but as a person capable of standing on her own. And for me, the public consequence had already served its purpose, it reminded them, and everyone else, that actions have visibility. That choices, even made with good intentions, can hurt when they strip someone of agency. One afternoon, I sat at Laura's window with my coffee. The city smelled faintly of rain and exhaust, and the light hit the buildings at just the right angle to make them glow gold. I thought about home, not the house I'd left behind, but the idea of home, the place where respect and trust existed alongside love. I realized I had reclaimed a small piece of it, not from my parents, not from Nathan, but from myself. And in that moment, I understood something important. Public consequence isn't vengeance. It's a mirror that shows those who've hurt you that their actions ripple far beyond the walls they think contain them. And sometimes the reflection doesn't hurt them as much as it teaches them. The week ended with a message from my mother. "Emily, I know this isn't the way we wanted things to happen, but I want to try to listen now," I replied simply. "I'll try too. We're learning together." For the first time, it didn't feel like defeat. It felt like a beginning. It was a rainy Saturday morning when I finally stepped into my own apartment, not the one Dad had arranged for me. I had found this place on my own. A small one-bedroom near the river, with a narrow balcony and the faint smell of fresh paint still lingering. The city outside was quiet, the streets slick with rain, and the sound of tires on asphalt created a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. I carried my first box in and placed it carefully on the kitchen counter. The apartment smelled like possibility. Not like home, not yet, but like a beginning. I spent the first few days unpacking slowly, deliberately. I hung up the paintings I had done in college, even the half-finished sketches I thought were too amateur to show anyone. They reminded me of who I had been, not just the daughter my family wanted me to be, but the person I had always been inside. On the counter, I set out the small ceramic mug Mom had given me years ago. It was chipped, the glaze fading, but it reminded me that love existed in small, imperfect ways. Love could still exist without control, without fear. Laura visited often. She brought coffee, helped me carry the last of the boxes, and listened when I talked late into the night about my plans, my fears, and my anger. "You've been through a lot," she said one evening as we sat on my couch, the rain tapping softly on the window. "I know," I said, "but it's different now. I feel like I'm finally the one steering this ship, and I found a job, not the creative coordinator I had first applied to, but a slightly different position at a small marketing firm downtown. It was enough to pay rent, enough to feel competent, enough to rebuild my independence piece by piece." The first paycheck felt surreal. I held it in my hand, tracing the numbers, thinking of all the months of rejection and frustration. This wasn't just money, it was proof that I could exist without someone orchestrating my life for me. Slowly, I started rebuilding relationships with my parents. Mom called more often now, not to check up, but to genuinely ask how I was. Dad showed up one evening with a bottle of wine and an awkward smile, apologizing again for the lease. It wasn't easy. The trust that had been broken didn't return overnight. Some nights I would sit in my apartment thinking of that dinner, the eviction, the secrecy, and feel a pang of sadness all over again. But healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about moving forward while carrying the lessons with you. Nathan, too, began to change. He sent texts more frequently, not to show superiority, but to ask questions, genuinely interested in my life. He admitted to me later that he hadn't realized how controlling their plan had been, how it had made me feel invisible. "Emily," he said one evening, sitting on the balcony of my apartment, "I was awful. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. I'm sorry." I nodded. I could forgive him not because what happened was okay, but because I no longer needed resentment to protect myself. I began small routines that felt sacred. Every morning I brewed coffee and looked out the window at the river. The water moved in quiet patterns, reflective and constant, reminding me that life goes on no matter how many storms pass through. I cooked my meals now, experimenting with flavors and recipes that made me smile. Sometimes, the smell of garlic and onions simmering would fill my apartment, and I'd remember dinners at my parents' house, but this time I wasn't serving anyone else. This time it was just for me. I started journaling again, writing down thoughts and feelings, reminding myself that independence also meant emotional accountability. One evening I met a neighbor in the hallway. She was older, kind-faced, carrying grocery bags. "New here?" she asked. "Yes," I said, smiling. "Just moved in. Welcome." "Don't be a stranger," she said. And for the first time in months, I felt the subtle warmth of community without obligation, without judgment. Months passed. I attended family therapy sessions with Mom, Dad, and even Nathan. The conversations were hard. Some words were said that couldn't be unsaid. Tears were shed. Frustrations aired. But slowly they began to understand that love wasn't about control, about pushing someone into life on your terms. Love was listening, trusting, supporting, even when it meant letting go. And I began to understand that forgiveness wasn't about condoning the hurt. It was about freeing myself from it. One Saturday morning I went to my mailbox and found a letter from Mom. "Emily, I am proud of you. Watching you step into your life has been humbling. I hope one day you can feel that our love, though flawed, is real. Love, Mom." I held the letter close, the paper soft against my cheek. For the first time, I didn't feel bitterness. I felt connection. It was imperfect, yes, but it was real. I walked into my kitchen, brewed a cup of coffee, and placed it in the chipped ceramic mug. The smell of warmth filled the air. I took a sip and smiled. I was finally home. Not the home I had been given, but the one I had claimed for myself. And in claiming it, I had also reclaimed something far more valuable, my sense of self, my voice, and my place in the world. Because healing, I realized, isn't just about moving on. It's about standing tall in the space you create for yourself and knowing that the people who love you will eventually meet you there, on your terms. The apartment felt quiet now, comforting instead of lonely. Outside, the river reflected the golden sunset. And I knew that even if the past couldn't be changed, the future could be shaped, and I had the steering wheel firmly in my hands. As I sit here now, watching the river shimmer under the late afternoon sun, I sometimes think back to that night, the family dinner, the lease, the betrayal. I remember the heavy weight of their words, the cold silence of my room, the sting of feeling invisible in my own home. I remember thinking that I had no choice, that I was trapped by the very people who were supposed to protect me. And yet, here I am, not because they changed overnight, and not because the world suddenly got easier, but because I made a choice. I chose to speak my truth. I chose to step into my life, even when fear whispered that I wasn't ready. I chose to trust myself. It didn't make the betrayal disappear. It didn't erase the sting of those 48 hours, or the moments when my own family didn't see me. But it gave me something stronger than resentment, perspective, independence, and self-respect. Life has a strange way of teaching lessons we don't ask for. Sometimes those lessons arrive in a whisper. Sometimes they arrive as a slam at the dinner table. I've learned that love without trust isn't love, it's control, and that independence isn't about leaving everyone behind. It's about finding your voice so that when you do step away, you do so with dignity. I've also learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the hurt didn't happen. It means freeing yourself from carrying it forever. And when you do that, you make room for relationships to grow not on the terms others set for you, but on the terms you set for yourself. Some days, I still think of my parents and Nathan. I wonder if they understand how much their secrecy hurt me, how much I needed honesty rather than arrangement. But then I remind myself, their growth is not my burden. My healing is my responsibility. And slowly, over months, I've seen change. Not perfect change. Life rarely offers perfection, but small, sincere steps toward understanding and respect. That, I think, is enough. So now, when I make coffee in my chipped mug, when I watch the sunset reflect off the river, when I feel the comfort of a home that I have built for myself, I do so with pride. Because home isn't a house. Home is the space where your voice is heard, where your choices matter, and where your heart feels safe. I've found that home in myself, and I leave you with this, my dear listener. If someone you love makes choices for you without asking, do you speak your truth? Do you step into your life, even when it's scary? Do you claim the dignity you deserve, even if it means leaving the comfort of familiarity behind? I'll tell you this, it's never easy, but it is always worth it. because the life you build on your own terms will carry a kind of strength, peace, and freedom that no one else can ever take away. Would you have stood up for yourself like I did? Tell me in the comments, and if my story resonated with you, consider subscribing because sometimes the stories that teach us the most are the ones we least expect.